Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I'm joined by the amazing Jeff of Suns and Shadows. Jeff, how you doing today, man?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, buddy.
No, dude, this is such an honor for me. But before we talk about why you're here, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit.
Uh-oh.
Suns and Shadows actually started as a follow-up project after a previous podcast had ended. You guys all became fast friends following the MST3K revival. I never thought I'd be able to say that ever in a million years. I thought I was going to mess that up for sure. But you guys thought you had a niche to podcast about canceled and forgotten TV shows. So whose idea was it to make that the basis of the podcast?
Relatively mine, because it was kind of my pivot point from what I was doing to, do I want to do this anymore, to, you know what, maybe I do want to do this, prove a few people wrong, and do something fun that nobody else out there talks about, like shows like Friday the 13th, the TV series anymore, Ash versus Evil Dead, all the way to
Mhm.
like Space Above and Beyond, the Richard Dean Anderson show Legend that starred John Delancey that nobody even remembers. So things like that. And it's like, hey, nobody's talking about that. We can talk about that. Rewatch them, still have some fun.
Right. Well, I mean, and like I said, you guys stuck with it, and eventually, you moved it from just a podcast over to YouTube as well, expanding into movie reviews and live streams, but still really sticking to sci-fi and horror. So let me ask you this: we're talking about forgotten and canceled TV shows. If you could bring back one TV show, and let's say it was an older show, it came back at the time that it went out. I'm not saying like you bring back Happy Days now with the cat. You know what I mean? Like if you could
Right.
make like one more season of a show in its prime that you guys talked about, what is the one show you think you would do one more season of?
One that I would bring back that would actually probably do well, I would go to Space Above and Beyond.
Okay.
And that was by Glenn Morgan and James Wong. Final Destination fans, these are the guys that started that franchise too.
Yeah. So like how many seasons did that actually have?
That had one about 24 episodes and a cliffhanger that made everybody angry, but it was also the big middle finger to the network on, oh, you said you were going to give us a second season and you changed your mind at the last minute. Well, we changed our mind at the last minute and decided to kill just about everybody on the show.
Oh. So see, I hate when shows end on a cliffhanger, and we're not like for us fans, like Ash versus the Evil Dead, for example, which I don't think was on
Exactly.
purpose. I think that was canceled after the fact, but
Yeah.
um, I was so ready to see where that was gonna go. Like I was like, I love Ash
We
versus
were
Evil Dead,
all
but
there for that.
right. And even though it is still going on now, if I could bring back the one that meant the most to me, my friend, oh, you can't see it. I'm going Futurama. Of course, my camera's not gonna work. I have my Bender tattoo.
I was going to say, I
Um,
saw the bender for a brief second there.
yeah, Futurama. It is still going on now. It is exclusively on Hulu, but it's not the same anymore. Just my absolute favorite episodic TV show of all time.
The show that's been canceled so many times, yet it keeps coming back somehow.
You can't keep a good guy down. Thanks, Chucky. So and you guys don't have to go far to check out Suns and Shadows because we have all of their links right down in the description. So make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel. Make sure you're following the podcast. Make sure you're leaving your 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast, and make sure you're following on social media as well, so you can stay up to date on all the amazing things they have coming up for us as well. So, you guys, like you said, you stick predominantly to sci-fi and horror. But in order to do that, Jeff, horror had to start for you somewhere, my friend. So now I would
Yep.
like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Jeff, the first horror movie you watched was
1982's Swamp Thing. I was at the ripe young age of 5 going into 6 years old. My babysitter hauled me to this movie. This is like my first horror memory, everybody. Literally, I ain't kidding. She took me to the movie so she could hang out with her boyfriend in the back row. She set me on, like, at the time, like, they had 3 seats on one side and like 20 seats on another side. And they were just a far enough back from me, but they put me right on the aisle edge as I'm watching the movie. And I only remember certain scenes here and there, but one always kind of stuck with me. So,
sure.
but that was my
And
first horror experience, for good or
I
bad.
I just had to look it up, guys. This is episode number 586 of my
Nice.
first horror movie, you guys. This is episode one talking about Swamp Thing. So I'm
Really?
very, very excited that we get to talk about something that for me, I love Swamp Thing media. I grew up a big fan of the Swamp Thing comics. I think the Swamp Thing comics are absolutely phenomenal. And for me to finally be able to talk about my love, I've always been a big fan of Creature of the Black Lagoon. I've always been a big fan of Swamp Thing. I think there's something so romantic about it, as weird as that sounds. Like there is such a just the character himself, and I've always just been a really big fan and very terrifying. Even in the comic books, there's a lot of real horror that comes with Swamp Thing, and we know, obviously very, very young going to see Swamp Thing for the first time,
Yeah.
and you started to talk about it a little bit, man, but I want to dive right into the swamp now. Very effective scene. What
Oh, yeah.
was that scene that affected you the most, Jeff?
It was the scene where, after Swamp Thing was amputated, he lost an arm, and they imprisoned him along with Adrian Barbeau's character, which, as an adult, Adrian Barbeau, hey, no bad reason to go watch Swamp Thing. But
Right.
between the juxtaposition of him kind of reaching up to the sunlight and then his amputated arm starts to grow back. And then at the same time, there's another transformation sequence, which I don't remember it at this time, but back then, I remember hearing the screeching and yelling of pain. And I always kind of thought that was Swamp Thing. It wasn't until I got older I realized, oh, that was the other creature that was transforming. But that whole compression shot of reaching up to the sun, the arm regrowing, and like the shrieking of pain, just it echoes to this day. It gave me nightmares as a kid. I swore I would never tell an adult that I saw a Swamp Thing because Lisa, the babysitter, took me there. And she would take me to other horror movies for her boyfriends after that for the next
Right.
couple of years. And
Well, Lisa,
so,
if you're watching, thank you. I appreciate it because you started a love of horror, and that is very admirable, my friend. So thank you, Lisa, for doing so. Um, and like you said, when we go back, especially a movie like Swamp Thing, there's so many things that go over our heads in these movies, especially when we're, 4, 5, 6 years old. All we care about is the creature. Like you said, that arm growing back, seeing it come back, like it's such a great scene. And Swamp Thing, I feel like, is an underrated. People more put this towards sci-fi than they do
true.
horror. And I've always wondered why, because I feel like Swamp Thing is 100% rooted in horror.
Yeah,
Um,
has is and always will be. Like even the 2019 TV show was way more serious horror.
mhm. And I think that it's amazing to watch. And like I said, the older you get, the more you start appreciating what horror means. Do you have a scene from? I know that which scene affected you the most from Swamp Thing,
Yeah.
but what would you say your favorite scene from the film is?
Oh, probably any of them with like Louis Jourdain. He was so great as Dr. Arcane. Like I just remember watching him, and it's been a favorite since I was a kid. So I have that memory, and then I have Dr. Arcane coming on screen, and every time just being, I'm in control here, even though I'm really not. Like that was like for most people was Bond villains. This
Right.
dude was so iconic as Dr. Arcane. Like he chews every scene. He makes everybody else look like B-level actors compared to like, oh dear God, Sean Connery's on set.
Well, and like you said, when you have these moments of Dr. Arcane, mad scientist almost, in different
Oh,
iterations of the stories. And I love the fact that we can look back on this movie and really appreciate what it is. And like you talked about, you also get to see the beautiful Adrian Barbeau, which none of us would ever be upset about in any way. So now with Swamp Thing, not very many kills throughout this movie, but we always talk about the kills on the show, obviously. Was there a kill from this movie that stuck with you a little more than the others?
none of them are really all that remarkable, to be honest with you. So I don't know if I could really pick one that was the best of the bunch.
Sure.
I'd almost say to give like some sort of weight to it, I would say, um, the scene where he first dies and then he transforms into Swamp Thing. That would probably be the most iconic one and probably the favorite, where you lose your main character and then you go through the transformation sequence. It's something that RoboCop later would replicate.
Yeah. Oh yeah, your move, creep. Uh,
Yep, pretty much.
I'm a Detroit boy, man. So you talking RoboCop? I'm all ears, man. I totally understand. Yeah, Clarence Bottinger, baby. It's so funny because I've used that so many times. Because obviously I'm a huge Detroit Tigers fan, so it's always
Yeah,
Tigers are playing tonight. I never miss a game.
there you
Like
go.
so many quotes from RoboCop, man, that I
Oh
just
yeah.
throw out. So again, talking about Swamp Thing, it's gone through many iterations. TV shows, comic books, movies, and now in Hollywood, as we know, remakes, requels, sequels, it's kind of all the rage. It's what they love to do. Would you like to see them try to do another adaptation of Swamp Thing today?
I would if they were using some of the same cast from the 2019 TV show.
Sure, sure.
But it does sound like that is being included in the DC works in the future as far as like a Swamp Thing and a new Constantine movie. Question is we going to get the Keanu movie sequel that people are talking about or what? But they're all going to be completely separated from the DC cinematic universe, whatever we're getting this go around.
Mhm. Well, and I mean, I think DC's making a concerted effort to try to put out great material. I mean, Mike Flanagan just signed on to write a new Clayface movie.
Yep.
So, I mean, if you have Mike Flanagan attached to a project, I'm there opening night. Mike Flanagan could write and direct a live action Pocahontas, and I'd be there opening night. And I would know that I'm in for the ride of my life. Um, so to know that he's going out and he's going into the comic book world, and he's going to put some real good storytelling and genuine horrific moments in Clayface, I'm sold. If they could get someone like that to try to capture Swamp Thing, so that way you're getting, I don't want someone that's going to come in and over CGI the movie. I want someone that's
Right.
going to write it to where we care about the characters, we care about the story, and leave it as practically as we could possibly make it.
I agree with that. Yeah. And I his for him, his works are kind of hit or miss with me, but for the most part, I like his work.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's fair. Me personally, he's probably my favorite writer director right now. But I know a lot of people that feel the way you do. It's hit or miss, and I think that's respectable. If someone is out there creating art that every single person loves, someone's lying. So I love the fact that as human beings, we can talk about these things that mean so much to us, and other people it may not be. But it's all about respect and respecting art and the art that gets made. So I totally dig that. I'm
Hey,
not
it's
a
also the horror community. We're the
right.
one community left that can still argue our butts off with each other and still be friends at the end of the conversation.
Bingo. I go through this a lot because I'm not a huge Tim Burton guy. You know,
Yeah,
I think there's maybe two or three Bird movies I'm a huge fan of, Batman being one, and then obviously the only perfect movie ever made, Pee Wee's Big Adventure. But besides that, most of his stuff I could take it or leave it, and people are like, "What? He's the greatest," and I'm like, "Cool, it's not for me. I'm glad you enjoy it. It's just not for me." So,
right.
um, we know that horror started for you with Swamp Thing, Jeff, and again, I'm super stoked I had the ability to talk about it for a little bit. But here for a second, I do want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. My little buddy Ghostface is here and he
Uh-oh.
has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Jeff? What is
Oh.
your favorite horror movie of all time?
Okay, so this might be the little bit of a curveball back at you. My favorite horror movie of all time is probably the movie that actually got me into being a horror fan, period. That would be Phantasm 2. And it's because my dad played that for me at a more appropriate age of about 12. And VHS tape was playing it. He had his like new girlfriend. She was into horror at the time. He's like, okay, I guess you can watch this. Like, yeah, you could argue I saw like RoboCop before this. I never
Sure.
thought RoboCop was a horror movie, but Phantasm 2. And subsequently, that adds into Phantasm as a fantastic movie, but I'll always go to Phantasm 2 as my absolute favorite because that's what actually brought me into like, this is awesome. I love it. I can't get enough. I want more. Wait, this was part two? And in the context of the fandom, part two is not many people's favorite because we lost our main lead and we got James LeGros instead of A. Michael Baldwin.
Mhm.
But it's like,
And
but this is the movie that brought me in. So I can't.
bingo.
And in the context, I thought James did a fantastic job. Baldwin would have done just as good a job too. But
Mhm.
this is what they had to do to make a bigger budget movie and get it approved by the studio. And we got it.
This
It's a great freaking movie.
I love all the first three Phantasms. I think all of them are great, and they're
Oh
all
yeah.
great for different reasons. So I mean, I could wax poetic about these, but 4 and 5, and I could take them or leave them.
We
But
could talk about that for like an hour.
yeah, but the first three I think are absolutely amazing. I think the
Yeah.
first three movies are just fantastic. And I've always been a big fan. The Tall Man scared the shit out of me as a kid.
Oh
Like
yeah, me too.
Welcome home, boy.
that was a wrap for me, man. Like
Or
I was like,
cutting
no,
the
I'm good.
finger off and then the yellow blood. Like when I
Yeah,
was watching part two and then I ended up later watching part one, I'm like, you know what? I had to have seen that movie as well as a kid. I just don't remember it. But the
sure.
second I saw that scene, the second time with the fingers getting chopped off, I'm like, I've seen that before. And that was the only movie that did it. So it's like, I don't remember seeing that for the first time.
Right. Well, I mean, and they go all out, in the Phantasm movies. Like you said, in Phantasm 1, you get, the sphere to the head. Like you get so many crazy, the blood squirting out of the back of the sphere after it hits him in the head.
Lion
The
Claws and Arts,
Phantasm movies.
everybody.
Yeah. And the Phantasm movies, they're just extremely underrated.
Oh yeah.
In the horror community, obviously, we love them. When I say something's underrated, I mean in the general pop, in Gen Pop. I think
Yeah.
that
The
the general
casuals.
population, yeah, you know, everybody knows Ghostface, Freddy, Jason, Michael. But to go up to a casual fan and be like, dude, I love the tall man, they're gonna be like, I know a lot of tall men. Who are you talking about? So I think that the tall man himself is just extremely underrated as a character and one that just affected me greatly as a child.
Yep.
So we talk about, Phantasm 2 and we talk about Swamp Thing. But before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question. We're going to go back over and we're going to go back to Swamp Thing. And what we're going to do, Jeff, is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. We're not being critics. All we're doing is ranking Swamp Thing on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So, zero skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Jeff, what would your ranking of Swamp Thing be?
I would go a solid 4.5 on that one. Largely because it didn't do enough to make me a horror fan purely at that time. So I'm
Mhm.
deducting a half a point or half a skull on that one. Otherwise, it left such an impression on me. I've always remembered that. And then like a couple scenes from A Nightmare on Elm Street from 2 years later that forever scarred me on that movie franchise. I like it, don't get me wrong, but 4.5 for Swamp Thing 82.
Sure. And again, like I said, a 4.5 is extremely effective. There's very few 5 skull reviews I've ever given to movies, but there's a lot of movies that have affected me 5 skulls. So I completely understand and respect that. So I know I said it at the beginning, guys, but we're at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, all of Jeff and Sun and Shadows links are all down in the description, guys. So make sure you're clicking those links, subscribing, leaving 5-star reviews. It really does help push them into the algorithm. Liking the YouTube page helps with that tricky algorithm, guys, that we're all trying to counter. So please make sure you're doing that. I promise you're not going to regret it. Jeff, please don't go anywhere, my friend. I got a couple more questions for you.
Sounds good.
Um, Everyone else, if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. It does help build the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. Our links are in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.